Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look back on this time last year where we saw that unprecedented heat wave in July 2022, where we not only saw our temperature record broken, but we also saw the first time 40 degrees was ever observed in the United Kingdom. Now we'll go back, have a look at various charts and various statistics showing the data from this event, showing why it occurred and how it really was the stars aligning, making it very unlikely to happen in the near future, but not impossible. We'll have a look at various synoptic charts, reanalysis charts, look at some of the satellite imagery, and of course some of the Met Office official data from this event. Now, many of you probably already know, but this week currently, I'm unable to record forecast videos. So we have got a set of interesting historical videos for you to look at, not only to learn about past events, but also to help forecasting future events, as you'll be able to see what sort of extreme synoptics we would be looking for on some of the models we do look at on a daily basis for these sorts of events. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now, I do remember this event very vividly, and most of you do as well. It was an extreme period of weather, and it had quite a big build-up as well. It was 2 weeks prior to that we saw the first GFS run showing extreme heat, showing 40 degrees being observed, ridiculous temperatures. And I know at the time many people did bat it off as an anomalous GFS run, but it kept on building, on some members starting to touch on it, and eventually it got into sort of the 10-day time frame, and even some of the more traditionally reliable runs like the ECMWF starting to hint at high 30s, and really the GFS was extremely consistent with it, and we eventually saw 40 degrees observed on the 19th of July 2022. Not only did we see 40 degrees observed, but it smashed our previous temperature record, and multiple regions smashed the UK temperature record. So it wasn't just one area saw some extreme microclimate conditions, or even potentially an anomalous weather station in sort of an urban heat island like you can see in Heathrow or some London regions, for example. No, this was an extreme event that happened up and down the country. The temperature record on the 19th of July was officially 40.3 degrees in Coningsby in Lincolnshire. So not even in your traditional London sort of urban heat. Multiple stations broke the 40 degree mark, and this broke the temperature record by 1.6 degree, a huge increase. And we've just been nudging up that temperature record significantly in the last 4 years or so from that prior big jump we saw in 2003, where we got up into the 38 degree range. An extreme event, and multiple stations broke even 39 degrees, including areas as far north as North Yorkshire, with most regions breaking 37 degrees, Wales breaking 37 degrees, Northern Ireland got above 31 degrees, not quite breaking its national record, but there or thereabouts. And Scotland got a new national record of 34.8 degrees as well on the 19th, smashing records. Now, I know there's always a lot of ambiguity when it comes to temperature records, because the planet has been around for millions of years, and when you look at the temperature records, we can go back reliably about a century, and we do have data going back into the 1800s as well, but you could argue it's not that reliable compared to the instruments we use nowadays. So we always do have to take a pinch of salt with these temperature records, because it is temperature record of the last 150 years or so, not all time. Yes, it's highly likely that the UK broke 40 degrees at some point in the past few thousand years, or at least a few million years. It's extremely likely. So we always have to look at that from that sort of spectrum. It's the hottest temperature we've had in about 150 years at least. Now, it was a ridiculous event, as at the start of the video. It really was where the stars did align. And we're looking right now at the GFS analysis from this period. Now, if we go back to the Friday, the 15th of July, this is when the hype was really starting to build. We started to see red warnings issued on the Saturday here for extreme heat through many regions for the Monday and Tuesday. But you can see we've got high pressure over the top of us. The upper air temperatures are not actually that warm. But we have to look to our south. We've got this low pressure system out just off the coast of Portugal, and this is what causes the heat wave, really. This sits out in the Atlantic and allows this big dome over the UK of nothingness, really, and high pressure just dominates that. We see into the Saturday, high pressure starts to become established, and we've got very hot air to our south. So we've got two things aligning here. We've got a low pressure off the coast of Portugal, which we do see quite often. It normally pulls up the traditional Spanish plume that we like to call it. But this is different. And the reason for that is because not only are we seeing a traditional Spanish plume, an absolute optimum Spanish plume coming into an area of high pressure, an area of drier air, so we don't have clouds that cool the temperatures down, we don't have thunderstorms, things like that. So not only is the Spanish plume optimum for hot temperatures, but the air masses, Spain and Portugal, are being absolutely cooked at this point, with the upper air temperatures in excess of 25 degrees at 850 HPA, even some getting up towards the 30-degree range. Now this allows the southerly wind to bring in a ridiculous air mass. You can see the plume moving northwards under this huge area of high pressure dominating northern and western Europe, and you can see we are just about in the optimum position. The hot plume here engulfs the UK completely. And we see the upper air temperatures get in excess of 20 degrees, even getting up towards, I think, 23 degrees in some spots before getting pushed away by the Wednesday. Now, it's, as I said, completely stars aligned. This hot plume slightly further eastwards, we're on the periphery of it, slightly further westwards, it mixes more with Atlantic air and gets cooled down, and we get 35 degrees, not 40 degrees. And that's the reason why this was a good few degrees. This was a jump, a step change in conditions. Now, there are plenty of arguments to do with climate change, things like that. Climate change has got nothing to do with this pattern. This is a Spanish plume. That is what happens. We see these southerly winds. We see pushes of hot air from Spain regularly. Most summers we see at least one or two Spanish plumes where the temperatures get into the 30s at least. Some years it's not a particularly hot Spanish plume. It's maybe 30 degrees. Other years, 35 degrees. This year it got to 40 degrees. Now, where climate change and increase in global warming comes into play is when you backtrack it, when you go back to the days and weeks prior to this event. It's down to what happens in Spain and Portugal. This is where the climate change argument does come in, because the reason why UK saw 40 degrees was because the air mass in these regions was a few degrees warmer than generally it really should get. And this means the air pushing up towards the UK is a few degrees warmer than it should get. So the pattern isn't unprecedented. Yes, the pattern had stars aligned for the perfect conditions for hot weather, but it was this air mass over Spain and Portugal where the climate change argument comes into play. Again, I'm no expert with exact Spanish climate, but the reason for this really was dry ground and incredibly hot air sat over the top, just culminating in a massive heat dome where things are hot from the surface all the way up to high up in the atmosphere, and it means the air mass is able to penetrate further northwards without losing its intensity. So perfect conditions across Spain, aligned with absolutely perfect synoptics heading towards the UK, all culminated in this historic event. And that's why it's very unlikely to happen in the future, because not only would we need an incredibly hot Spanish season, we need an incredibly hot June and July heading up towards this period. We need the perfect synoptics for this, and of course we need this to happen in the optimum time of the year, which essentially is from around the middle of July until perhaps the first or second week of August, about a 3 or 4 week spell where it is possible, because too early on in the season the air mass simply isn't hot enough. Too late in the season, daylight hours start to shrink, sun strength starts to shrink, and that does mean that the intensity is just pushed down by a couple of percent, and that stops it getting towards the 40-degree range. And that is why this is so unprecedented, and why it is very unlikely to happen in the future, but not impossible. Yes, climate change probably has made this more likely, as it's made that air mass across Spain more likely to be in this sort of heat category. But it's everything else has to align for this to become. That's why people saying we'll see 40 degrees every summer are really not looking at the data and looking at why this occurred. As yes, there maybe is an increased chance of 40 degrees, but by no means it's going to happen every summer. Maybe every few decades or something like that. So yeah, very unlikely to happen again further in the future. And you can just look at the weather outside at the moment with flat westerly, cool, unsettled conditions, temperatures widely in the high teens, just to see that this idea that we're going to be cooked every summer is complete and utter rubbish. But you can see as we head beyond this, we actually do go into westerly flow and things actually go a lot cooler after this towards the last week of July. So it really was an unprecedented spell of about 3 or 4 days. Now, if you look at the reanalysis, we can actually see the 19th of July. This is the satellite image. And this is why also we saw those unprecedented temperatures. We got a dry slot of air. You see to our north, to our west, we got cloud and areas of rain and even a few thunderstorms along this strip through southwest England. And if this was slightly further northwards and eastwards, if this cloud had pushed in, if we were in slightly more water vapour in the air, we'd have seen some cloud build, and that would have prevented temperatures from peaking as high. And I believe that's what has happened. That's happened in, I think, 2019, where we did see the temperature record broken, but it didn't get smashed. It got broken by, I think, 0.3 of a degree or 0.4 of a degree to 39.1. And the reason why I didn't go higher is because we saw clouds build in from the early afternoon. I remember seeing that from where I was in London. I saw those clouds building in, and from that moment I knew that the temperatures would be prohibited by a degree or so. So that's another important factor. We had dry air, which allowed the sun to have relentless sunshine on the ground, just cooking the ground and the air with that, and that's why those temperatures did peak. And typically, just as we got to the evening, the cloud and the showers and the storms started to move eastwards to cool things down. So stars just aligned. Those showers and clouds rolled in 2 or 3 hours earlier. We would have hit 38 degrees, maybe 39, and we wouldn't have got much higher. But it's all absolute optimum timing. And all I'm trying to do is emphasise why this is going to be such a rare event to occur again, just because everything did align together. Now, the Met Office has got a very interesting archive on historical weather events, so do go check this out on the Met Office's page. But they have a whole document highlighting this event, looking at some of the data I've just looked at. Of course, they've got access to more of their archives. They're going to have a lot better data on here. That's why I'm actually going to use their document here, a couple of their images, because I don't have access to that, because they are in the Met Office archives or on their not available on their website. But you can see here, for the weather warnings, we did have red warnings issued for the Monday and Tuesday through large swathes of England. And again, these are the regions where we saw the high 30s. Exceptional spell of weather. The first time we've ever saw a red extreme heat warning issued. And to be honest, because it was issued for these sort of temperatures, I don't think we'll see another extreme heat warning, red warning issued unless we do see those temperatures get into the high 30s once again. So again, extreme heat warning, these red warnings will be as rare as the 40 degrees probably will be. And yeah, completely ridiculous sort of conditions here. And I remember seeing that put into force. I remember on the Saturday it was put into force, and I was unable to make a video on that day, but I do remember looking at that and just thinking how ridiculous the conditions were going to be. Now, we've got some satellite images from Met Office here, we've got the thunderstorms patterns, but I wanted to have a look at these individual charts. We can have a look at anomaly charts on the Met Office website, and we'll actually have a look at that for the month of July, but we can't get individual day charts, unfortunately. So that's why we're using this. And you can see the 2 days of the very extreme heat on the 18th of July and the 19th, and then we've also got some comparable dates that, as I said, when the temperature record got broken previously in July 2019, and of course the big step change we saw on the 10th of August 2003. We'll be able to compare this. But from a quick glance, if we just zoom out so we can get all of them in the frame, you can see that the biggest thing really with this is the extent of heat. July last year, on the 18th and 19th, the extent of heat was much larger than July 2019. Similar area, we saw the peak across parts of the East Midlands, East Anglia and London region, but the extent of sort of 35 degrees plus is a lot larger, and it's huge compared to 2003, where 2003 really was a very small heat dome effect towards the London area. You can see here we saw 38 degrees, but we saw it really only around the London region and neighbouring counties. Really was a southeast East England event. July 2019 was an east event, really. Other regions widely saw 30 plus degrees. Most of England saw 30 plus degrees here. But it really was the East Midlands, East Anglia, London regions. But it was a whole nother level. And we saw why that was from the various reanalysis charts. That it was pretty much the whole of England and Wales, up towards Scotland and Northern Ireland, saw unprecedented heat as well. Because on the 18th, it got up towards the mid to high 30s, got up towards the 38, 39 degree range, and then got smashed on the 19th. The whole brown extent here is 38 degrees plus, smashing previous temperature records prior to 2019 through a huge portion of England, all the way from the south coast up towards the north east coasts here. And you can see it's that sort of East Midlands, Lincolnshire point where we saw the 40 degree range broken. Again, just highlighting the ridiculous extent of these incredibly hot temperatures. Again, you can see some individual plots here for the temperatures, again, widely reaching 38 plus degrees in this region. 40 degrees reached up towards Yorkshire, East Midlands regions. You can see the Lincolnshire point there for Coningsby. And even into the London region, we saw 40 degrees broken at Heathrow, I think at Northolt, and in the city as well. But even areas further eastward saw 39 degrees. Ridiculous temperatures. And if you do want to have a look at this chart, this document as well, you can see some more data from this year, again highlighting how rare this sort of event is and continue to be as we go into the future. Very interesting data here, and again, it is unfortunate that it's not widely available to have a look at this data. But regardless, if you are interested more in this event and have a look at its rarity, do check out this chart. Finally, we'll just on look at some freely variable Met Office data for July as an overall month, looking at the anomalies. So not only would you see the hot spell, July was an incredibly hot month overall, an incredibly dry month as well, and that contributed to the 40 degrees. It's all these small little things, the heat over Iberia, the exact synoptics, all just culminating together to provide extreme heat. So the overall month of July was incredibly hot, and that meant ground temperatures were very hot as well. You can see here through the region where we saw the 40 degrees. The 40 degrees, of course, aided these temperature anomalies. These are the 1961 anomalies, even to the 1991-2020 anomaly, we're 2.5 degrees above the normal temperature, or the average temperature. So we are in a huge anomaly here. And of course the 40 degrees would have contributed to that. The 3 or 4 day heat wave we saw associated with the 40 degrees contributed to that. But of course we'd have 4 weeks more of July, and those other 4 weeks were generally pretty hot, especially the weeks leading up to this event. Again, all contributing to that temperature on the ground automatically being a couple of degrees hotter than it should be, all allowing that air mass, once it reached the UK, to just completely dominate, having nothing to cool it down. Another factor that we're not looking at here is also the wind direction. We've had previous events where the high 30s was possible, but the wind came in off the North Sea, cooling temperatures down, especially for eastern regions. The wind here was a direct south-southeasterly, taking the shortest sea track from Dover to Calais on that sort of stretch, that sort of wind direction, meaning the sea surface temperatures had very little opportunity to cool the temperatures down as well. That's another very important fact to take in, and you can see that from the reanalysis here. The winds are coming in straight from the southeasterly. Again, this is not the direct wind for these regions, but you can see the synoptics showing roughly where the wind direction is coming from, and you see those eastern regions coming directly across some of the shortest sea tracks, again aiding those surface temperatures, that surface air mass to not get cooled down too much. And finally, another fact we have to look at is the rainfall. Both on the 1961 to 1990 and the 1991 to 2020 anomaly, rainfall was ridiculously low, below 20% of normal. Again, we saw huge wildfires associated with the hot spell as well on the afternoon of the 19th. Again, that did cause a lot of damage, and that was down to the dryness of the ground. Of course, not only did the dryness of the ground contribute to fires, but it means there's very little moisture. And moisture, when we see extreme heat, moisture evaporates, can form clouds, increases the humidity, but also, simple physics from GCSE, evaporation causes cooling. And that means if we did have a lot of moisture on the ground, or at least normal moisture levels, or rainfall was average, it would have just held those temperatures down, maybe by 0.1, 0.2 a degree, maybe 0.5 a degree. Can't say for certain, but minute amounts it did. And when you add on all of these different things, the wind direction, the exact air mass, the exact synoptics, the exact lead up in both temperatures and dryness, you can see how all these things do culminate in the stars aligning. And it just means that this sort of event happening in the future is extremely unlikely. Will we reach 38, 39 degrees? Probably in the next few years. I do think that's very probable. But reaching this 40-degree range once again, we need all of these things to align, and the probability of that happening is very, very low. And again, we could rule out 40 degrees in summers coming up if we saw perhaps a cool June across parts of Spain and Portugal. A very cool June across parts of Spain and Portugal would rule out 40 degrees for the UK, simply because the air mass won't be hot enough. That's something we can look at over the next few summers. Now, there was some rumblings earlier this year, because Spain and Portugal had a very hot June, very dry June. So did the UK. But the synoptics haven't played out, and July has been very cool. So even if we did see a ridiculous air mass move in right now, I doubt we'd get much above the 35-degree range, because the ground temperatures in the UK are pretty cool at the moment. The sea surface temperatures have cooled down quite significantly, and we have got a lot of moisture around as well. Right now, actually, Iberia is still cooking out there with temperatures into the mid-40s. But even, as I said, even if we did see that air mass move in, we wouldn't see anything remotely close to 40 degrees because of the lead up. Again, emphasising the stars really do have to align to see 40 degrees once again. So anyone out there thinking that we're going to see 40 degrees anytime soon is definitely not looking at the probabilities in the correct way. The stars really did align, so not only does it just increase the unprecedented nature of this event, and it will be one to remember for the years to come, as we truly did get absolutely cooked in this heat wave this time last year. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you have enjoyed. Hope you do enjoy the fresh sort of 19, 20 degrees around for many at the moment, as I think many of you would agree is much nicer than the 40 degrees that we saw last year. And hopefully we'll have great sort of average temperatures end to this summer as well, with plenty of dry and moderately warm weather. So as I said, thanks for watching, hope you have enjoyed, and I'll see you again for another forecast video coming up this weekend.